what I had in mind with the series for this month, which was somewhat disturbed by our exit to the great dominion of Canada and our return and things of that sort, was really to trace the main features of religion, and particularly of gnosis within religions from early times to the present time. Now that is a real big job. It's probably bigger than we can easily handle, but we will handle it just the same. No doubt many of us are not aware at the present time, or at least it's not in the focus of our awareness. Please signalize to me if my faltering nonagerian voice doesn't convey my thoughts, that there have been some very significant developments in spiritual or religious matters, to a very large extent affecting Judeo-Christianity in the last few months. And that to see these developments and to draw, if possible, the proper conclusions from them is really quite an important task. And so I indicated, for instance, that probably the most important jump, if we can use that term, forward and into, maybe even into gnosis in this period of time, has been the discovery of two archaeological finds. Biblical archaeology is, of course, of old provenance, but I think that in terms of their importance and their possible future events, these discoveries pretty much put a lot of the others in the shade. And what I'm referring to is that we have the two great discoveries, one after the other, even though they were really discovered chronologically fairly closely together, but owing to circumstances which I will share with you in a minute, they were not publicized as much as they might have been. And what these were, after all it's a slogan by now, what these were the so-called Dead Sea Scrolls and the so-called Nag Hammadi library. Now, what are these? I understand, although my age and debilities have prevented me to going there, that the Dead Sea Scrolls had a very fine exhibit in our general neighborhood just some time ago at the Reagan Library, and that it was a very good exhibit, for which I am glad. I have seen I think that they are pretty much showing the same Dead Sea Scroll exhibit everywhere, so I have, what's up? Okay, no. Anyway, just to refresh our memories, the Dead Sea Scrolls, as they are called, were the first ones to which some public attention was called, owing to the fact that a vast number of articles, connected articles, in the New Yorker magazine appeared about the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the New Yorker was a very prestigious publication at that time, may not be at the present time because the value of this publication goes up and down like a yo-yo. But in any event, that is where it first appeared. And subsequently, I think it also appeared in book form. Now, the Dead Sea in, if you want to call it that, Palestine, has had the reputation for some time, although not very openly, of having hosted an ancient but very, at one time, very active sect or subsect of Judaism, which, at least by people outside of Judaism, tended to refer to as the Essenes. Now, these folk put into their scriptures, which they hid and concealed in a pretty ingenious manner, put in their scriptures all manner of things. Some of them of a prophetic nature, of what is to happen, which is, of course, one of the specialties of Judaism, because the Jewish religion's major revelations in the Old and the New Testament are in the nature of prophecies. Prophecies are generally understood as forecasting of the future or of something that pertains to the future development of the people to whom the prophecy is addressed. And as such, I think that is a correct definition. Now, we need to keep in mind, however, that as my late and lamented friend, Dr. Robert Elwood, who, along with his wife, I mean not simultaneously, but passed away just about 10 days ago, a very great scholar and a very good esotericist and a very good friend, and I will mourn him greatly. But as Dr. Elwood was to point out, prophecy is a particular function of religion or of spirituality. And so to some extent and degree, it might be a small degree or a major degree, prophetic material is present in most religions. We know that in some, like Islam, it is the central focus, because the Prophet Muhammad, peace be on his name, as one should say in Islam, the Prophet Muhammad and some other minor figures are regarded as prophets in Islam, which means that they have special view, a special understanding, and consequently a special communication about divine things. And that the most important of these, certainly chronologically, is the Prophet Muhammad. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, that there are no others, and the Christian Messiah, let us say Jesus Christ, is also recognized in Islam as a very important prophet. So Jesus is a prophet in Islam. I wonder how so much antagonism manifesting in cruelty can occur within Islamic communities against Christians with that high an opinion of their founder. But it is definitely true. We have to remember that just because something is a religion, or whatever we want to call it, school of spirituality, that doesn't mean that it is pursued in a manifestly honest manner. I think that if the dishonesties that have been propagated by different religions at different times would be all enumerated, they would be very, very frequent, would be very, very numerous. And so that needs to be kept in mind. But let us say, in any event, there are still prophetic religions in the world, which are religions that have been founded and proclaimed, promoted in various ways at various times by their followers on a prophetic basis. And so we need to keep in mind that the prophetic element is a very important one in the religious world. Now, we also need to keep in mind that the presence of the prophetic element is probably of very ancient origin, because that we need to pay attention a little bit to the chronology in these matters. Things that appear, according to our information, to have started long ago and far away, should be regarded as important. Now, it doesn't mean that they need to be regarded as true or as obligatory for us in some way. That's a different issue again. But that their age bestows a certain quality on them which needs to be recognized. Now, I brought up my late friend, because he just died a week ago, Dr. Elwood, who was the head of the religion department at USC for many years, a very, very fine man. Dr. Elwood, in some of his works, because he was a highly regarded and very active scholar of religion, would indicate that the prophetic calling, the prophetic activity in spirituality is, this reminds me, but if I get started on that, then that's going to be very bad. So I'm not going to get started. But I just very quickly, believe it or not, in the years when I first came here, and then therefore in the early 70s and 80s of our blessed era, we had a gentleman whose name I forget, like so many other things at the moment, living in the Beechwood area, who was the first man known for talking to animals. not just talking to them, but communicating with animals. Also, he wrote a book called Talking to Animals. And I used to see him walking on Franklin Avenue, reading a book, and then kind of falling off the sidewalk a little bit and so forth. But he was a very interesting gentleman. Probably one of his biggest claims to fame was, and that's what reminded me, that he had a pet fly. He had a pet fly, and this he put into his book that he wrote, and various people were particularly excited by that fact. One of them having been, let's see what was, no, I can't remember the names anymore, but a gentleman who was the great movie builder and that built the Sid Grauman, that's who it was, built the Grauman's Chinese theater, the Egyptian theater, and some others. Sid Grauman at some probably mildly alcoholic weekend party heard that there was this communicating fly, and he absolutely had to see it. So he went to the address of the fly communicator in this instance, and came late at night and came to him and he said, "Dear friend, I understand that you have a fly that responds to your commands." "Well, yes," he says, "Mr. Grauman, I do, but you know Freddy," which was the name of the fly, Freddy only comes to me when I call him and when I can wake him up. And at night he sleeps. And this was night, so I don't know. Well, he says, "Come on, try to call Freddy." So Mr. Grauman walked up and down his house, which was on Beechwood Drive, and he called out to Freddy. And after quite a period of time, then a thin but distinct buzz could be heard. Freddy had made an appearance. So Freddy came and sat on his finger. And he walked over to Mr. Grauman and said, "Look, this is Freddy, the one you have heard about." And Grauman was very astonished. And he said, Freddy does wake up when I call him and comes. And he's really a very intelligent insect. And so they spoke a little bit more about him. But since I just saw a very small Freddy sailing past me here, I thought that I should mention that. And if you want to find that book, I'm sure that you could still do so. The book's title was Talking with Animals, but I cannot think of the author's full name at this time, although I saw him many times. We would go down on Franklin Avenue for something. There he would be walking with an open book in front of him, and I always felt, when is he going to step into some rat hole and fall over? But he didn't do that. Very, very interesting man. And then when I was looking through records, I saw that he was a member of Besant Lodge of Hollywood. So he was a fellow member. Interesting man. In any event, you see, there it is, Freddy. This is Freddy Jr. coming along. In any event, that had to do with that. But it just indicates that we had people of unusual interests and unusual talents in this neck of the woods for a long time. And some of them were really very interesting people. Some of them were just a little bit kooky, but not to the point of being worthy of being disregarded. My feeling and my impression with the various members of the lodge and various people around here and different other organizations was that they were really all worth paying attention to. Why? I can't exactly tell you, but probably because they all were tuned in, plugged in, whatever metaphor you want to use, to some reality that we are not ordinarily connected with. And that having a connection with that other reality made them unusual, insightful, and informative people. Because we don't have too much information about, let's say, the other reality. And some of it that we get is pretty kooky at that. But let's say it is important to avail ourselves of what might be useful information, especially about these unusual topics. So that is really one of the reasons why I'm bringing it up. But let's say, considering all that, not only the talking with animals, but various other activities, disclosures, prophetic utterances came our way because of the unusual people among whom we were living. And they somewhat regret that that is not really very much the case right now. I need more kooky people in my surroundings. I need more real fools, in the thorough sense, you know. The ones that don't mind jumping off the rocks down into the great depths where there might be something important. In any event, that is an important issue. Now the prophet, according to Dr. Elwood, who wrote about it extensively, and Mircea Eliade, a number of other experts. In fact, Dr. Elwood and his wife were both students at Chicago University, and they were personal students of the great Mircea Eliade, the Romanian scholar who really was the discovery of the nature and the import of shamanism in modern times. A very, very important person who himself was murdered at the University of Chicago by a political enemy. A political enemy having been some Romanian communist. May he go where such people should go. In any event, Dr. Elwood indicated in his scholarly works that the prophet is a direct descendant of the shaman. He said that apparently from very early in the human race, there were people with unusual interests and unusual talents. So if indeed you have felt sometimes, treated askance by people who said, well, you're a very unusual fellow, then maybe you keep that in mind. These unusual fellows started all the really important, all the really exciting and transcendentally inspiring things in the world. The common, ordinary people did nothing, except eventually become communists, which is probably what they are trying to do now in the United States. I'm not so sure. But in any event, those who did something for the unusual, the peculiar, the exciting, the ordinarily not available, these were the ones that, because of some kind of a wild, old Siberian word, shaman, they were named universally by the scholars, the shamans. So the shamans were people who, for some reason or the other, often I think very valid reasons, although other times maybe somewhat questionable reasons, had claimed entrance into another reality than the one in which we live. And their claim to that entrance very often turned out to be quite justifiable. They weren't just whistling Dixie. They really had entry into realities that we ordinarily don't have. And that is how it must be understood, that there was always a group of people in any early association of primitive humanity that had access to another reality. And interestingly enough, and that should be of interest to those who are either artists or who have an interest in the arts, that one of the ways that we know about this phenomenon is that a very large number of these shamans depicted their own shamanizing, if you don't mind that word, by art. And since in the very early days of humanity, many of them were cave dwellers, they lived in the caves, and on the walls of the caves they drew or painted or in some manner fixed images that were pertinent to their activities and to their consciousness. Many of these are in the south of France, which is a very, very interesting place anyway, and where for a vast period, much more than has been actually discovered, a vast number of kilometers and so forth, they run caves under the earth. And if you go there, if you're lucky, then you'll come back. I only managed to go in a tiny little bit, but it is also true that some of this cave painting shamanistic art is there to be found, and it is often very, very interesting. They are usually depictions of people who are apparently of the shaman's kind, who wear antlers of deer on their head, who shake musical instruments around, and who apparently are not adverse to they being displayed in this form of art because they're proud of it and happy with it. And if people don't like what they are doing, then those people can go someplace. That's the French mentality anyway, and which is really quite understandable also. Why? Because the paranormal, the mystical, whatever you want to call it, realm of experience leaves a certain regard for itself. When you have experiences of that sort, you usually are convinced that something important happened to you. And you know what? I think that somewhere inside of us there is always a little explorer of the unexplained. There is something there that says, hey, I would like to see a ghost. Hey, I would like to see Grandma marching around in the caves underneath the Ariège mountain in France or something of that sort. In other words, what I have experienced is something important. And this is one of the great troubles with our civilization. What is that? That owing to our detestably bad educational system, to our equally bad publicity system, television and everything else, we allowed the importance of the unusual to drop out of sight, to be not regarded as anything important. And of course, that's relatively easy to do because what you experienced is something unusual, and just because of that, when let's say, often happens with little children. Happened to me a lot when I was a little child, all kind of weird stuff. Don't get me started on that. The childhood remembrances of Stephan Hoeller. No, you don't want that. But let's say if the unusual experience drops into forgetfulness, it is no longer considered important. It is not something to think about. You should think about the latest election or something, some other stupid stuff like that. So then it diminishes in volume. And that is why when something unusual happens to you, whether it's an unusual dream, which is quite likely, whether it's an other kind of unusual paranormal experience, try to keep it in consciousness, try to remember it, try to, if available, look up information that might relate to it, and that will give you some clue as to what the intention of the experience might have been. So our trouble is, in this regard, that we have restricted our interest level to trivialities. And what really matters, that which is beyond the veil, that is that which has no physical explanation, not even by AI or IE or whatever the case may be. That's That's unfortunate. Because more importantly than anything else, when we want to characterize the human being, and you know there are all kinds of characterizations, man and woman, the human being is a knower. The human being needs to know. And if our avenues of knowledge are restricted or taken away from us, or we are punished for having them, or any of those things that can happen, then we are unhappy. Because our consciousness, and I will hesitate to say brain, because of course the brain and the nervous system are involved. But you know what? This is a very bold statement, and you should forget it. Even if there is only your brain and your nervous system, you would still be the knower. You would still go after knowing. And that is your greatest virtue. That is your greatest possibility, and that is your future. Now, after this highfalutin kind of talk, what are we talking about? In any event, let's say the rise of shamanism, of a very kind of quick, primitive, unasked for, and probably uncultivated acquisition of knowledge, and the attempt to pass that knowledge on to others is a very, very fundamental trait of the human race. Now, I had in my country where I grew up, in Hungary, I had a frequent interaction with the members of the curious tribe, the Gypsies, which we call the Tigani. And in connection with that, my father would tell me, listen to them. These people are different from us. And it's natural to assume that they know some things that we don't know. The people who are different from us, they also have a different kind of knowledge. And therefore, we should learn from them. We should be nice to them, and we should not discriminate against them. The only time that the Gypsies were discriminated against in Hungary was when the communists ruled the country. Why? Oh, because they didn't want an underclass of a dark skin color around and things like that. They didn't read about that in Karl Marx or Friedrich Engels or any of those rascally writers of the late 19th century. But anyway, we were still told, be nice to them. They know some things that we don't. If we are nice to them, like it's with all people, then they're going to be nice to us, and we're going to have a good experience. And we did that. We had a whole section of our garden, sort of big backyard, which was sort of reserved for the Gypsies. When the Gypsies came originally in my days, still with the wagon and the horses, and they were allowed to park there, and then my father gave them various things, little money and food and so forth, and they were our friends. And if that is not an overstatement, then I would say it is something that we all need. It is something that we all need. The reason that so many people are so lonely, that they are so unhappy, that they are so without adequate company, the kind of company that they would like. Is why? Because they remove themselves from the company of others. And often the more strange you are, and the gypsies were strange, because étrange, strange, means that you are not like the other people, but they certainly were not, and they still are not. They are a people altogether to themselves. But if you are friendly with them, if you get into their confidence, I assure you, you are going to profit thereby. Of course, you also have to watch out, because you may be cheated. You may be led into schemes. I mean, these are the original schemers. You have to know that. But if, on the other hand, you show goodwill toward them, you also will receive a goodwill. So this going back and forth of the goodwill that you find in the Bible, Old and New Testament, is just something that is very important. These are the real rules of life. And if you don't follow them, at least to some extent, then, to say the least, you are likely to forego some valuable things that might happen to you, some valuable company, some things or the other. Maybe it'll just be a tarot card reading. Maybe it'll be something else. But if you show trust and confidence to other people, the likelihood is very, very great that those same people and the people who are associated with them are going to likewise show trust and confidence to you. So here I am preaching once again, but then I am a preacher, so what you want to do? In any event, it is very important that such rules should be observed. Now, I am sure that was the best trump card, if we can. Now I got to the cards. The best trump card of the shamans. When the shaman could do some magic, the neighborhood kids and the neighborhood middle-aged people and the neighborhood old people would come on. Oh, what are you doing? What is that? Can we do that? Can you teach us? We'll give you 5 chickens, or whatever the case may be, because we all want to know. And when we run across people who seem to be knowing something, then we are attracted to that. And that there is the problem, let's say, where the false gnosis, which is the physical, which is physics, which is electronics, which is purely physical inventions, which do not carry any deeper meaning. Even if you try to put it in there, it's still not there. That is unfortunate. And I might say in many instances, if the deeper meaning is not discovered therein, it is a waste of time. That which does not increase your consciousness, that which does not increase your gnosis, that which does not show you something that you previously didn't know, is a waste of time. now I've expanded my loud talking side, and maybe go on from there. In any event, so what I spent a lot of time on that. But let's say what we find to concentrate these insights in a useful fashion. What we find in the Dead Sea Scrolls is a lot of primitive magic of a shamanistic nature, and with it insights that were always worth regarding and never should have been probably lost. And the first of these is, well, first of all, let's say, we agree that there were these two great discoveries, the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nachavardhani Library. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, I was somewhat disappointed, because I thought in it, I expected in it all kinds of messianic elements. After all this, they were written and hidden not so very long time before the time of Jesus, and that really was not there. But in it, there already appear, if you have, I will need my book from the office, which is the Mitch Horowitz book. In any event, first of all, the Essenes were moving, and so several scholars have affirmed they were moving toward the Messiah archetype. Who was their Messiah? Thinks. Well, they were also looking for a Messiah, and they picked a Messiah by the biblical name of Joseph. So Joseph was the Essene archetype of the Messiah. So what we have in the Dead Sea Scrolls, we already have early manifestations of the Messianic archetype. So we might ask ourselves, was then an early gnosis among the Essenes possibly a foretelling of Christ, the universal liberator in the scrolls? That's very difficult to tell. But nevertheless, many of the scholars have discovered and said, in the Dead Sea Scrolls there shows already the rise of a messianic desirability or a messianic phenomenon. And that's important, because some of the scholars claim that the Old Testament itself is full of Messiah stuff, shall we say. And it's not inaccurate, but I think it means that the archetype, as Jung would call it later on, of the wise man, the man of foresight, the prophet, the shaman, is scattered throughout the Old Testament. people always wanted to find a prophet. And sometimes they were lucky enough to find one. But it is of considerable importance. And so I think we can say that what the scholars felt that they discovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls of a messianic character, namely of the coming helper, the coming liberator. You have to remember that these Essenes did not gather on the shore of the Dead Sea just for no good reason, because they knew that they need to hide, that Romans and Philistines, and which incidentally is the term that is used by all these Dummkopfs. I translate to you Dummkopf from German when you want it, as the unusual people, that the unusual people were afraid of their coming knowledge, and so they were cultivating a kind of a unitary messianic image, meaning that, yes, there is going to be one person, and this is going to be the Mashiach, the Messiah. This is going to be the liberator, who will liberate us from, just from having to live here in seclusion on the shore of a crummy, stinking sea, and things like that. In other words, to improve our condition in some fashion. And then, let's say, the scholars came along trying to discover further aspects to the messianic archetype in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and what they found was the figure of a Joseph. Joseph, whether it's Joseph, it could be the Joseph from the earlier Old Testament Bible, who of course was a very important fellow. He engineered the liberation of the Israelites from the Egyptians, where they were being enslaved. He was a sort of Middle Eastern Abraham Lincoln. He freed the slaves. So that was definitely of an important nature. So the coming of a messianic figure is definitely foreshadowed in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the Christian scholars, and the original scholars, for instance, of the Dead Sea Scrolls were predominantly Christians, and many of them were Jesuits, which, depending on how you feel about the Jesuits, will make you rejoice or will you make sad. In any event, so let's say a liberator was expected, a helper was called for, and we might ask, were there any what we would call Gnostics among them? And that is a matter in this case. I don't know, I generally don't believe in evolution, but that is a matter in this case where you have to take a kind of evolutionary development in account, because there was a development, and the development was that among the Essenes of the Dead Sea Scroll there was sort of growing a spirit of messiahship. There are in the scrolls and the writings we find many references to the fact that we expect someone to come and help us. We expect a helper. We expect a liberator. We are praying for the coming of the liberator and things of that sort. But that's about as far as it goes. Now then, we might say that there's a definite seeming forecasting there of the Messiah archetype, which then, of course, becomes very powerful after the time of Jesus, during the time of Jesus, because it was a concept that was generally accepted, that somebody is going to come and liberate the Jewish people. And sure wasn't Adolf Hitler. Not that kind of a liberation. But that there was a need for liberation. And you know, one of the characteristics of archetypal themes, to use that Jungian expression, genuine archetypal themes, is that it becomes generally applicable. The archetype of the Messiah, the archetype of the liberator, the archetype who will free the people from all their afflictions, is the evoking from within the human being a spiritual reality that is there already, but that is anxious to come forward. It's important to remember. If you don't have it within you, you are not going to have it outside of you. Now, you know, this again, you can play with that in all sorts of ways. But let's say the wise prophetic person recognizes his or her own prophetic potential and tries to bring it forth, tries to work on it, and tries to bring it forward. So we find these things among the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, there is another issue which is also very great importance, and it is the appearance of the feminine, often under the Greek term Sophia or the Hebrew word Chokmah, in the scrolls and beyond. So already a wisdom woman, a spectral feminine wisdom, appears in the Dead Sea Scrolls. You have to look for it like the Dickens, I assure you that. Many nights with my lamp, but you know, you will find it. So that there is a coming of the feminine gnosis. The appearance of the feminine in the scrolls and beyond. So it is something, two things are being born. A Messiah and a Sophia, Sophia. And these are both of very great importance. Now it didn't take the Messiah terribly long to come forth and make himself known. Look at the whole New Testament. Look at all that. Look at the crucifixion. Look all the all the many sayings attributed to Jesus, and he was there. The Messiah had arrived. Whether he was the same one that the Essenes were envisioning or not, go and ask the Essenes. After all, they were just here in an exhibit at the Reagan Museum, so maybe you would find them. But the issue is that a messianic figure who certainly, as time went on, after his own departure seemingly from the world even, became an extremely important figure and one of the greatest cultural figures of world history. Now, once again, I'm not pushing Christianity here, but just trying to analyze as to what has taken place. Not a Buddha, not a Krishna, not a Rama, not an Arjuna, nobody else, became such an extremely important and influential messianic figure as Jesus of Nazareth. Why? Well, you can go to any fundamentalist teacher and he will keep you there for a few hours telling you why. But I can't tell you why, except that sometimes there are major messianic figures and sometimes there are minor ones. And this was definitely in terms of his faith was a major one. Now, however, at the same time, parallel, although much more low-key, as was considered appropriate, with the rise of the messianic figure of Jesus, was the also messianic figure of Sophia, the female Messiah. And this already appears in the scrolls. There are proto-Kabbalistic motifs that appear in the scrolls, for instance, which indicate that there is a feminine being, the deific feminine being or angelic feminine being that is Chokhmah, wisdom, and that is coming and that is going to have an important role. And now there comes August the 15th today, which is in the Universal Church East and West, is the feast of the Assumption of the Virgin Mary in the 20th century. Let me see. So what occurs that Pope Pius XII, one of the very greatest popes in my view of the recent centuries, decides that and these are theological subtleties which cannot be expected to be of great excitement to us, because they are born out of a different zeitgeist, if you don't mind that German expression. But the feminine gnosis, in Greek called Sophia, already apparent in the scrolls, now becomes even more important. And that is how Pope Pius, who was a very, very great man, an astonishing man, that's the only Pope whom I have. No, I saw Pope John Paul. What am I doing here? Putting myself into a lesser category, but Pope Pius XII basically declared that there always has been a pious belief among the people that the Virgin Mary, the Mother of Jesus, had not been subject to deterioration like other people when they die, but that at the period after her death, she was taken by her Son, the second person of the Trinity, by Jesus, and elevated into a totally transcendental place. So that, as Pope Pius said, the Son and the Mother now are united, while my father, my mother and I were kneeling in our tiny kitchen in the Alps, listening to the radio. Proclamamus, declaramus et definimus. Wonderful Latin. We proclaim and we define, we proclaim and we define, declare and we declare that the Virgin Mary was taken to heaven. And you know who was the person who seemed most delighted with this? Oh, you will say, well, maybe the Patriarch of Constantinople, although the Orthodox and the Orthodox Church's various patriarchs declared, oh yeah, sure, that's nothing new. We can show you the really old scriptures that you Latins, as they call us, as you Latins don't know. And we had some of our church fathers way back say that she was not allowed to undergo the process of death like other people, but that she was taken, and moreover that it all occurred in Ephesus. Ephesus is an ancient and very highly regarded feminine shrine. It was the shrine of the goddess Diana. And the Greeks all around there, which is now in Turkey, anyway, the Greeks around there would greet each other, but great is the Diana of the Ephesians. Because that was, and it has always been acknowledged that the Virgin Mary and Mary Magdalene, that she was mentioned too, and others who had gone to Ephesus and out there awaited, as they called it, the dormition of the Theotokos, these are Greek words, the going to sleep of the Mother of God. And that then she went. But how she went, how those things went, was not really, let's say, discovered until now. And so, but the Greek Orthodox and the Russian Orthodox bishops and so said, oh, well, we knew this all along. He says, I can show you in our old scriptures, the ones that we hardly ever look at now, but it said that the Blessed Virgin went right straight to heaven. She didn't hang around here, that they went to Ephesus and then she went to the Holy Trinity. So they have their ways out, those Orthodox are wily people, but they are able to say, this is not anything that, as they also declared about something else, which I will conclude with in a minute, that they have in their traditions all kinds of things that either have been forgotten about in the Roman Catholic tradition, which of course is the other one, or had not been adequately dealt with, but that in those who are really informed about Orthodox traditions and Orthodox scriptures will find that various great things that are being discovered now, oh yes, we knew that all along. Of course, if you had asked an Orthodox priest even 100 years before that, say, what about, oh, I don't know anything about it. Yeah. So, however, that is true. And so, with that arose a tremendous Marianic revival in the Universal Church, and also a great rejoicing in Zurich at the residence of Carl Jung. He said, well, now it's happening, now it's happening. Now the goddess is being recognized as the goddess because she's back up in heaven. And he especially thanked Pope Pius for having made that proclamation, and he was very, very happy about it. Any event, now, so what happened, you can be a pope and you can make big pronouncements, whatever, but are they going to work? Is there going to be a noticeable effect? Well, in this case, there definitely was, because the Assumption, the new dogma of the Assumption, gave the Mariology, which is the worship and the study of the Virgin Mary, a tremendous boost, and still has it. I can testify to it because I was in the Roman Catholic Church and in the Roman Catholic clergy when that proclamation was made, and I noticed how the regard, the services, the literature, everything regarding the Virgin Mary rose to the sky, was just increased tremendously with that papal enunciation, which is important in itself. And if at the same time, if we wanted to make a statistical evaluation, I would say the interest in the deific feminine, which in turn has its concomitant in the earthly feminine, really rose. The beginning of modern feminism was not done to a bunch of ladies in New York, but was done by Pope Pius XII, who adored the Virgin. And the thing is, he started something. When he said, well, if the Catholics can be that reverential about the Mother of Jesus, there must be something there. And so, I was told by the professors in Claremont in various places, it says the Mariology is really going now. And I said, well, sure, understandably. But let us say, it is also something that I greatly revere, that Pius XII was the only one who stood up for the Hungarians and against the terrible persecution of the church and the other people that was going on at the time. He also, they fixed the Feast of the Assumption for August 15, and it is still there. Now, if we if we agree with a statement of Jung, which said the universe is governed from within outwards. Now that can be easily misunderstood to think that there is a governor, like a kind of an interior Sacramento inside that sits the governor who governs the universe. That's obviously not what is meant, but there is a secret government of the world. There are developments that are taking place, which are not a matter of external recognitions, but of internal insight, and that the Assumptio Mariae, the Assumption of Mary, the theologians are weird. First of all, they have two different words. Jesus ascended, that is the Ascensio. Virgin Mary was assumed. But it still means, in other words, she didn't do it by her own power, that's the implication, but nevertheless she did it. So that needs to be kept in mind, that there are two different words there. But in any event, I remember Serbian Orthodox priests that I was talking with who said, "Oh yes, we believe that all along, here, have another glass of brandy," which was as welcome as the disclosure that they just made. But let's say, so what happened now, subsequently to that the Assumption of Sophia in the 20th century had mysteriously and perhaps unbeknown to a great many people, had created a great furor in Christendom. Because of course the Protestant, oh no, it's a woman, God, you know. I have to laugh very well. I don't laugh as much as I should, but I have to laugh when I go past some Protestant churches now, and they have various things there about indicating the elevation of the feminine. I said, "Yes, Reverend, where were you when her Assumption was declared? Where were you where you recognized the importance of this Jewish girl who bore a strange little child? Where were you?" "Oh, well, I know we okay." But let's say the only effect, the direct effect, was of course on the Roman Catholic Church, and to an extent and degree somewhat less, because of course they try to be Protestant and Catholic at the same time, which is sort of like being a cat and a mouse at the same time, and that was the Anglican Church. You know that one of the last people, on the last day when he was still alive, who went to see Pope Francis at his deathbed, were the King and the Queen of England. Not all these presidents and prime ministers and nobodies who became somebody, but somebody who was somebody, and we soon will be, hopefully, in heaven, the King. In any event, that is interesting. And I think part of it is also that the recognitions in both churches, the COE, the Church of England, or the Roman Catholic, have moved closer together and came to recognize the very important, what we would call archetypal events, which is again the only person who saw that when it was happening was Carl Gustav Jung. And Carl Gustav Jung, of course, said that a whole new era, the era of Sophia, the era of the feminine divine was coming, and that Pope Pius's pronunciation, his pronunciamiento, as the Spanish would say, was part of that. So I think it is true that from that time on, if you watched what was going on in the various churches, in various situations, that the interest in and the regard in the divine feminine was growing and growing, and really has grown up to this time. But we need to keep in mind that this is not some kind of a secular development. This is a sacred development. And Carl Jung called it an archetypal development, and that's his word for sacred. But it is something that is happening. And in order to see much of it and to be able to internalize what has happened, the best thing is to look at what has been happening since the time. I think the proclamation by Pope Pius was in either, I have to look, there are books where you can find, was either in 47 or in 48. Yeah. When my father and my mother and I were all kneeling in the kitchen to listen to the voice of Pius XII. Oh, he was a magnificent man. When they brought him into St. Peter's with the candles and everything, opened the door, and up in the air floated this white dressed figure, waving at everybody, and the people, the Italians, Papa, Papa, Papa. Yeah. That's what he did. Of course, you got to remember, he was a Roman. He wasn't just Italian, he was a Roman. The Pacelli are a Roman family. In any event, I should be a Roman now because I should conclude. And so let me say that that, of course, I think is the second great development that has come upon the world in religious, spiritual terms after the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi. Now we have a deific feminine in heaven. If you don't want to think so, then I don't know, go to the movie theater. Our feminine deities have been there for quite a while, and I tell you, some of them are really deserving of much regard. But let's say something has happened. The first thing happened back in Palestine at the time of Jesus. The second thing happened in Rome at the proclamation of the Blessed Virgin's assumption into heaven. And what else is likely to happen? You know? Jung said that these are archetypal developments, and these are going to have great effect on the culture for a long, long time. And I think that Jung, as so often, was right. In any event, of course there are others, and they're going to those maybe next Friday, because another event that maybe is not that apparent to everybody, I'll just briefly mention it, is the appearance of the, let's see, how did we mention it? Yeah, it is the appearance of the divine mercy movement which occurred in our days. The divine mercy movement, again, as you might gather, is a Roman Catholic movement, originated in Poland with the pious nun Maria Kowalska and her visions, who had visions of Christ. It wasn't the Virgin Mary. But still, when you read her, the many, many disclosures and prophecies that Christ made to her, you can see that they are also, let's say, of a very transcendental nature. And if you are ever in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, a little town, up there were various states, Massachusetts and others get together in New England, you would discover that there is a huge development which was acquired over the years, that is the National Shrine of Divine Mercy. But without, you might say, all right, but this was a vision of Christ. Yes, but who had the vision? A nun, another woman. So that also needs to be kept in mind. And so in many, and we have friends who live very close by there, and say that the number of people who gather there, particularly on Marianic holidays. So on the 15th, now there's probably people all over the place, because they consider it a revelation from above, and that something that is to transform the culture, and it is apparently of very great importance, and it's all over the world. I mean, 100,000 of people come out in the Philippines, for instance, on the day of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin and various others. So we have, for all intents and purposes, if the good fathers in the Vatican don't mind, and so we have acquired a new goddess. We have acquired a new goddess. We discovered her, we proclaimed her, and we listened to what she said, and we worship her presence in heaven. So, this is, you can easily say, oh, well, that's just superstition. Yes? Ask those 100,000, millions of people over the world, from Africa to Australia and to New Zealand, who are having huge worship services of the Divine Mercy, which is the movement started by the nun Maria Kowalska, and which is now gaining a great many followers. And just to say very quickly, I don't know how many of you grew up as Roman Catholic children, but let me tell you, it was no fun when you were told, indoctrinated, that for all kinds of minor transgressions, you would go down below, deep down below, there is a place for you to go. I know, I was scared as hell. But there came the Divine Mercy movement and told you that with a change of your consciousness, with a few prayers which change your mind, you don't have to undergo any of those things, not even purgatory as it was explained, but you have certain prayers, certain change of consciousness, and you are to have a good ending and a good going home. Now, I can't. Yeah, I think I need to just say one thing. Of course, once again, when we compare some of these disclosures and what is happening in the Roman Catholic Church, in other churches, and so forth too, as when we investigate the content of these teachings, there is, at least to me, there is no other way of interpreting them but in the sense of gnosis. There is a gnosis that is being conveyed, and that has its own places of worship already. You should see that shrine of the Divine Mercy in Stockbridge. It's a magnificent place, but my friends who live nearby, they tell me the number of people appearing there, especially on big holidays like this, is unbelievable. They don't know where to put them. And they have more seminarians, many more seminarians than the diocese within which they are located. So the diocese and bishops don't get the seminarians, but the nuns and the fathers of the Divine Mercy, they get them. Why? Because there is something there, there's something moving, something coming forward, something that should have come forward many long ago, and that may be coming forward now, and it is a rebirth of the gnosis. We, of course, also have to take into account, and then maybe we'll reserve that for next time, that this rebirth in turn was facilitated, publicized, brought forth not by the Dead Sea Scrolls, but by the Nag Hammadi writings, and that all of these together are making for a world that is becoming every day more Gnostic. Forget about AI, forget about the politics, forget about all of that. Look above, where you can see anything, except maybe some airplanes flying around. But remember, there is something happening, there is something coming. It is the same thing that came 2,000 years ago and that can now be refurbished, rebuilt, and whoever is involved in it, God the Father, Pope Pius, thank you, thank you, thank you. This is what the world needed. Thank you.